Hello and welcome to the One World Quickfire Debates, brought to you by Concern Worldwide. I'm Peter Anderson, the Northern Ireland Director of Concern Worldwide, and I'm delighted to introduce today's debate. The motion for today is Raise Your Voice, Not the Sea Level. Climate change can only be combated by activism. The motion is particularly apt given the theme for this year's One World Festival, Act One World, and also with COP26 coming up next month. Proposing the motion, we have Hanna, the South Belfast MP for the SDLP, and opposing, we have Lisburn and Castlereagh City Councillor Alex Swan from the UUP. Both have been extremely involved with Concern Debates post-primary programme, with Clare having worked for Concern Worldwide for 10 years previously, and Alex is a long-standing adjudicator for the programme for the past 6 years. Without further ado, I invite the proposition, Hanna, to open the debate.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thanks to Concern for the invitation. In 1966, Robert Kennedy was invited by the South African Union of Students to come to their homeland and speak. It was a place of enormous beauty, rich in resources, but deep in thrall to a poisonous system that blighted the lives of all of those trapped by it. Then, as now, it was young people showing the way for change. Authorities in South Africa and in the US discouraged Kennedy from going. They were afraid of one person's potential to stir up trouble and give encouragement to the forces of change, and that might upset the carefully constructed apartheid system. He was warned that any efforts he made to speak out or act could inflame passions or threaten jobs or even encourage violence. It's better just to leave things as they were. What could one person do anyway? But in the face of this opposition, Kennedy went, and on the 6th of June 1966, at the University of Cape Town, he delivered what is often considered to be one of the greatest speeches of all time. Speaking to an audience that were yearning for change and a better future, but feeling powerless in the face of an enormous system, Kennedy reminded them that it's from numberless diverse acts of courage such as these that the belief of human history is thus shaped. Each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other, they form a million different centres of energy and daring. Those ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. Kennedy was giving voice to the great truth that changing any prevailing system starts with individuals. It starts with people recognising that they have a choice and exercising that power of choice to make change. As individuals make change, so they inspire others, and those connections and relationships build into a movement, and what before seemed impossible begins to become attainable. It's easy to look at big oil or major corporations or the inaction of governments and to despair. What's the point of shopping sustainably when faced with the damage caused by global behemoths? Why bother going to the climate strike? Why bother emailing my MP? What difference can one person make? But we forget that companies and governments, no matter how big, no matter how powerful, are only big and powerful because of us. As consumers, as citizens, as voters, we're the power that fuels them all. Without us, they're nothing, and it's our choices that enable them. The almighty market is often invoked as the ultimate arbiter of power and economic systems in this world, but it doesn't really exist. It's not a thing by itself. We are the market. Acting individually and collectively, our choices and our actions matter. They can enrich a few, they can entrench the status quo, they can ensure catastrophic damage to the world in pursuit of profit, or they can be the catalyst for real change. Changing any system in one go is almost impossible. There's just too much to do that's outside of an individual's control. And the bigger the system, the more difficult the task of change. The key to changing any system, though, is to find points of leverage, work out what's in your control and change that. And the more of us who connect and build relationships with each other, the more bits of the system fall within our control and the more changes we can affect. Your vote, your voice, your choices matter. Kennedy's speech didn't sweep away apartheid in 1966, but it did inspire a generation of young South Africans to believe that change was possible and to work to make it so. So the power of choice lies with each and every one of us. And the question is, what will you do with yours? The devastation caused by climate change is real, and the broken system that brought us to this point is enormous to change in one go. Time is short and action is required, but the power of change is ours. As another famous South African who drew inspiration from Kennedy, Nelson Mandela, said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." Thank you. Over to you, Alex.
Great. Thank you, Claire. When I first saw this motion, I thought, am I going to be expected to speak as somebody who's skeptical of climate change? Because that's not the situation with me, and it's not the situation with my party either. But when I read the motion, climate change can only be combated by activism. And I would take issue with that. There's various ways to combat, and we're going to have to combat climate change. Government, should it be central government, in our case, Westminster? Should it be regional government, as in Stormont, or local government? And only the other night we debated and supported a motion from the Green Party that declared climate emergency, and we pledged to work with whatever policies the government bring in. So go further down from that, then you have community groups and you have churches, and they all also can play a part in combating climate change in their own small way. And then you come down to the individual. And the individual has a part to play in terms of, because it ties in with industry and commerce, and where we decide to spend our money as individuals will influence the market. If there was no market for electric cars, nobody's going to make them because nobody's going to buy them. Profit is the motivator in that respect. And that's I'm not advocating capitalism over socialism or anything like that. It's simply a fact of life. You know, back in the day when people had their market stalls in medieval times, they only produced what they could sell. They didn't produce what was for something that wasn't the market. So the individual has a part to play in that as well. We also, I think, the government has a role to play in coping with global warming. I think I'm nervous about an assumption that we can combat it and stop it. I think we do have to think about mitigation measures as well. Just, you know, it's like saying we'll make the ship unsinkable, so we don't bother with lifeboats. That's what happened with the Titanic, quite frankly. And when the thing sank, there wasn't sufficient lifeboats to save the members of the crew and the passengers. So, but the motion says climate change can only be combated by activism. And it's what is meant by activism concerns me. I'm not convinced that the people on the M25 in London trying to get to an appointment are necessarily swayed by a dozen well-meaning people gluing themselves to the carriageway. I'm not convinced that a large pink boat in the middle of Clare would be more familiar with the geography of London than I am, but in Piccadilly Square, whatever it was, basically it brought London to, the design to bring London to a standstill. Or the last one, I think, was a large table fixed to the road and people glued to the table. I'm not sure that sways people. I think in terms, so it depends what's meant by activism. If activism is not asking for a bag at your shop, or saying to the shopkeeper, do you really need to put that in a second bag, or is there so much contacting Amazon to say you're complaining if you have too much packaging? That's activism. But I'm not sure. I think when people think of activism now, the danger is they associate activism with disruption of other people's lives. And I think that's actually counterproductive. So I would agree with the thing, raise your voice, not to sea level, yes. But I'm not convinced that gluing yourself to the road, where people miss an appointment, where people maybe miss a flight to the airport, it doesn't make them think is that flight necessary. They simply think they missed it because of a lot of green people, a lot of green activists. And I think it probably defeats the purpose of the whole protest. So that's so when I said climate change can only be combated by activism, I would disagree with that. And I think the evidence is there for all to see. Thank you.
Yep, I think they're really good points, Alex, and I think it is a multi-system problem that we have. And actually, I agree with you in some ways in terms of Extinction Rebellion or Insulate Britain or some of those groups. I suppose it's about trying to garner attention, but actually I almost think that has passed the attention. You only on all of our screens, if you open a newspaper, the reality of climate destruction and climate breakdown is there for everybody to see. And even You don't have to look to Australia, you don't have to look to sub-Saharan Africa anymore. I think people are seeing extreme weather coming their way. And actually, I would tend to agree with you. Sometimes it just annoys people, but I think you're right to say that activism, it can take many forms, but it's about individuals, yes, using your consumer power. And I agree with you as well about the fact that kind of innovation drives change, and some of that kind of enterprise and profit motive can take us some of the way, in terms of car manufacturers wanting to produce cleaner cars because they can sell them. There's a danger, though, that do they want to invest completely in their electric vehicles, because by virtue of saying that they're clean, they're admitting that their other vehicles aren't. But I suppose it's just about using your consumer power to show both businesses and politicians that you get it, that you see it, and that you're not going to accept the status quo, and you're not going to accept them refusing to take action. And you're right that it's community level and local government and national governments as well. But I suppose I believe that chimes with my point about it being individuals, because those are the building blocks that make up each of those structures. And I think that the fact is the transition will have to happen. We're already even here having to adapt to changing weather systems. The key question is whether or not it will be just, whether or not it will protect the most vulnerable, whether or not it will give people the tools to, say, better insulate their homes and protect against cold, whether or not it will ensure that there are decent jobs for people that aren't in the more polluting sectors, and crucially and particularly concerned would understand more than any that the impacts aren't felt by the poorest in the world, who have had absolutely no say over it. So I suppose we at least have a lot more power than them. We can change our lifestyles in a way that they can't, one way or the other. They will feel the action. At least we have some agency and some ability to stop it. So I'm not sure if it's in the spirit of the debate. I think we probably agree more than we disagree, but it's that it's individuals make up all of those bodies that need to act.
Okay. Well, it's a bit of a strange situation to be able to do it. I'm not going to force myself in the same way. I disagree with Clare, because I don't. I agree with a lot. I agreed certainly with, and I was interested to hear reference to Robert Kennedy. And I often thought the assassin's bullet that done the most damage in American history will be the one that struck Robert Kennedy, as opposed to Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. I think Robert Kennedy's a good opportunity. And also the South African reference. I was in South Africa in '85, and I was in 2 years ago, and it was a much more pleasant experience 2 years ago, when people looked you in the eye as opposed to looked at their feet when you're dealing with waiters and so forth. Mm-hmm. But I just think the point needs to be made. I don't think I have reservations about people who, like I say, the ones that take extreme actions. I think they do more harm to their cause. And I think it's the case, though. I can't remember the exact word of the saying, but where the good is lost in pursuit of the perfect. I remember that is the saying, actually. And I think people strive for perfection, and maybe instead of striving for the good, might be a more realistic thing. And I do think we have to be careful we do have to think about mitigation, because in Northern Ireland, for instance, the recent thing, and I'm not getting involved in the farming debate, but to cut down beef consumption to environmental grounds is no good if you're importing beef from somewhere else. We need to cut down consumption of beef. If we're going to cut down domestic production of things that are harmful, we need to cut down domestic consumption of those items rather than simply import them from somewhere else in the world, which is actually probably more harmful than producing them at home. So I think we need to be realistic about that as well. But no, I largely agree with what Clare said. I find people who are skeptical about global warming, I put them in the same category as those who are skeptical about vaccinations, quite frankly. I think they ignore the science, and they get too much involved in the finer detail, and they can, to an extent, being generous, they maybe just confuse themselves. But nevertheless, I think there has been a change in our climate. And I'm not, it may be, people say it's a normal thing. I'm not prepared to risk my grandchildren's lives, my great-grandchildren's lives, and further on. I believe in the old thing about you plant trees for you plant an oak for your descendants' benefit, not your own. And I think we need a bit more of that in the world now. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Clare and Alex, for a very interesting, indeed very important debate, highlighting the importance of individual action and indeed our individual voices, raising our individual voices to encourage change. but also the importance of national, regional and local government, and indeed businesses, churches and our local communities in combating climate change. Alex made just a very good point at the end in terms of just grandparents. I'm a grandparent myself now, and we really do have to think of the future generations and look after this one world we have for them. So Alex and Clare, thank you very much for your time and for a very stimulating debate. Join us again tomorrow for our next Concern Worldwide quickfire debate.
It was